Welcome to the Collecting the Past podcast. Funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities and in partnership with the Flannery O'Connor Institute for the Humanities, this project paired students from Georgia College with community members to collect oral histories from individuals who either lived in Milledgeville during the heart of O'Connor's writing career or whose lives were shaped by events that took place during this period. Our goals with the project are to expand the existing historical narrative of our town by documenting unwritten life stories and creating a public digital archive. As you'll hear, the students had fun creating their own podcasts in the style of their choice. Like our narrators, each episode has its own personality.
Mr. Bo, so the first thing we're going to start, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Todd? All right, the first thing we're going to start off with is I'm going to ask you where you went to school here in Milledgeville. Where'd you go to elementary school?
I went to Mrs. Roberts Kindergarten, and that's a big deal. That was a big deal. And then I went to City Elementary, and City Elementary was first grade through seventh grade, but when I got to be in the seventh grade, they closed City Elementary to the sixth grade. And they started putting in middle schools.
Yeah.
So in the
It's
seventh grade,
it's no longer like a junior high.
Right. In the seventh grade, I went to Northside Elementary. They were a brand new school. And then in eighth grade, I went to Baldwin High School. And then ninth grade through 12th grade, I went to Georgia Military College.
Okay. So did you have a wholesome childhood? I did.
Did
you have a fun childhood?
I lived on the grounds of Central State Hospital.
Okay.
My dad was the recreation therapy director for the hospital, and department heads got housing in those days. So we lived out among the patients at the asylum. And I rode my bicycle all over the place out there, and I could just, do whatever. We'd find lumber. They were building houses around, and we'd find scrap lumber and build tree houses. And I had a spare lot attached to our house, and we played football and baseball out there. And we just had a great growing up time.
Now, Mr. Bo, what is one thing you would say that y'all did back in the day that kids don't do now?
Well, we rode our bikes everywhere.
Ride bikes everywhere?
I don't know the kids do that anymore.
I don't think they do. I hadn't seen a kid on a bike in forever.
Yeah, and we played baseball on the sand lot. We had a backyard, and we made the bases out of rocks, and our backyards backed up to one another. So, we also played at Bonner Park in organized baseball, but we had a sand lot. We played out in the backyard till it was dark. Whatever the season, we were playing outside. The other thing I remember is we had a tire swing. And that tire swing would swing out over a bank. So you'd get on it in the yard and swing way out into the bank, over the bank, and then swing back. I don't know when I've seen a tire swing. So those three things kind of come to mind.
Yeah. So do you remember the first time you ever left this town? Do you remember your first time ever leaving Milledgeville?
I don't remember it. I don't remember the first time I ever left Milledgeville, but
or we can say moved away from home. Do you remember the first time you ever moved away from home?
Well, I moved away from home when I was 21. No, actually about 24. I lived in Milledgeville till I was about 24. But I remember
you lived in Milledgeville, and then where'd you move to after that?
I moved to Louisville, Kentucky after that.
All right, and what brought you to Louisville?
I went to seminary I was called into the ministry. I was part-time youth minister at Hardwick Baptist Church. I was married in 1976. In 1977, we moved to Louisville.
Lilburn, Georgia.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, Lilburn, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And what brought you to Lilburn?
No, I didn't go to Lilburn. Louisville.
Ah, Louisville. I thought you said Lilburn.
No, Louisville. Sorry.
Louisville. Now, were you like you said you were a youth pastor?
I was.
Now, what brought you into the ministry?
Well, Lord have mercy. That's a long story. My best friend played on the football team, and he was the tackle and I was the guard. And he was also the director of the youth choir at the church. And he said he was going to quit football so he could work more on his choir. And I said, you can't quit football. You're the tackle and I'm the guard. He said, well, if you will come to choir practice, then I will keep playing football. And my brother was already going, so I went. And at choir practice, I discovered they had girls there. So that was all the motivation I needed.
That's all you needed? Yeah, that would have been all the motivation I needed.
Yeah. So I sang in the youth choir at Hardwick Baptist Church, and then they made me a deacon at Hardwick Baptist Church in an early age, and then they hired me to do part-time youth ministry. And through all of those formative experiences, just heard God's call on my life, and off I went.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, Mr. Bo.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you said you talked about the girls were all you needed for choir practice to go for you to attend. Well, do you remember your first girlfriend? Who was your first girlfriend?
My first girlfriend was named Lisa.
Lisa. And how old were you?
I was probably 12 years old.
12 years old?
I had little boyhood crushes in elementary school, but first girl I really was excited about was Lisa. I was 12 or 13, somewhere in there.
Well,
she was my first kiss.
She was your first kiss.
Yeah. Sorry, I dropped my phone. She was my first kiss.
Now, I keep on asking you a lot of questions about about Milledgeville.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, did you when you went to seminary school in Kentucky, did you go to a school for what was it, a full seminary school? How long did it take you to complete it?
It was a 2-year program, and I stayed an extra year and did some extra study in pastoral care and counseling. So it was 3.5 years, and I had 2 degrees.
And so where was your first degree from?
My first degree was, high school from GMC, an associate in arts from GMC, and a Bachelor of Business Administration from Georgia College.
Okay. And so, will you tell me a little bit about how education shaped your life?
Well, I was always fairly smart, and I could learn, pretty good. My math teacher in high school would eventually become my stepfather.
Really?
And that was a pretty cool thing. And he was and still is a good friend in my life. And he was very encouraging. he's really one of the first people that told my mother that I had the ability, but I wasn't using it as good as I could. And so my mom had a little talk with me about that. And then I was inducted into the National Honor Society as a senior in high school. And I really had to work to get into that group, but a lot of my friends were in that group and I wanted to be in it, so I really worked hard to get in it. And then a high school English teacher really encouraged me in my writing abilities. And so those couple of things in high school were very instrumental. And then in college, my first couple of years, I was at Georgia Military College, and I just kind of slacked off. When I went to Georgia College, I was part of the Phi Delta Theta fraternity, and we were just getting started on campus, and I loved being in the fraternity.
Me too.
So I took a little more time to slack off in my studies, and then had an economics professor at Georgia College that just really encouraged me and said, you got to do better than this. You're smarter than you're doing. And so that was kind of, the English teacher, my math teacher, my English teacher, and then economics professor. Those guys really set the pace and challenged me.
Well, we all need people like that in our lives.
We do. Sometimes a foot in the butt is best motivation. So,
right. Sometimes the best love is the
tough love.
Is the tough love. Did you grow up in a religious household?
Not so much. My mom worked at the emergency room at Baldwin County, and she worked every other Sunday. And my dad was in the National Guard, and he had drill once a month. So a lot of Saturday nights we stayed at my grandmother's house. And my grandmother's 2 blocks from the First Baptist Church. So we stayed at my grandmother's house, and my grandmother was very religious. And so she taught us how to pray. She taught us about the Bible. She taught us about going to church. And my grandmother couldn't drive because she had a back condition. So at an early age, she walked wherever she went, and we had to walk to church. And I just didn't want to walk to church. I thought that was embarrassing as a 10-year-old kid. But we did anyway. So my grandmother was very instrumental in my faith.
Well, so can you tell me some of your favorite places around here in Milledgeville? Like what are some of your favorite places here in this town to go to?
Well, Bonner Park. We lived at Bonner Park in the summertime. I got 2 brothers, so one of us were always playing ball at the ballpark. And it's not there anymore, but that was a favorite place for us. The campus theater, which the facade is there, but the theater is not there downtown. We spent a lot of time at the campus theater. In the 3 days before Christmas every year was free for kids. So they would run Westerns and Three Stooges movies and stuff like that. And the kids could come and go to the movies for free. And in those days, they just ran it and then ran it again and then ran it again. So, we'd go in there and play with our friends and watch the movie. And our parents would go Christmas shopping. So that was kind of a neat thing. And campus theater was very, very important place. And the football field at Georgia Military College. I played football in high school. And we also did our drill parades on that field, and all of our PT with our military stuff we would do on that field. So that was a real important place.
These places that you're naming, like, do they hold any significant meaning to you?
Well, they all are pretty significant. You know, we all played ball growing up. All my friends played ball growing up. We lived at the ballpark. We were just park rats.
Yeah.
And then I learned to keep the scorebook and announce on the PA who the next batter was. You know, so and we ran from about 10 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. So one of us was always around there in the press box or, you know, stuff, keeping score, announcing, whatever. And in my junior college years, I ran the concession stand, and my two brothers were the you know, candy confectioner, whatever you call it, in the concession stand. I was working up in the press box. They were working in the concession stand. So we ran it for the recreation department. So that was pretty fun. The campus theater, you know, we'd leave the ballparks a lot of times and go to the movie theater and hang out.
Yeah.
Almost every Saturday in the fall we did that. The old Midway gym was another place. We played basketball there all the time. And one of us was always playing ball in that gym. And that was kind of a fun place. And then GMC, I spent 6 years at GMC because I did 2 years of junior college. So I was on that drill field, football field, PT field a lot. And, you know, all those places, I was never there by myself. I was always there in community.
With other people?
Being in community is pretty important.
Yeah.
Some of those people I'm still friends with today. So.
And that brings me to my next question, Mr. Bo. Are
right.
there, hold on. Could you tell me about any interesting personalities or characters you've encountered in Milledgeville over the years?
Oh, man. Daisy Mae Archer was the maid for our family.
She was the maid?
Uh-huh. So she was at my aunt's house one day, she was at my grandmother's house 2 days, and she was at my house one day. And so we were, you know, in those days we were a couple of miles apart from family, and I was always at my grandmother's house, and Daisy was always there. Daisy grew us up as babies. She was the nanny for us, 3 boys, and then as we grew up, we worked in the yard together and talked about life together. She was a wise African American woman, and she was very important in my life. Dink Johnson, D-I-N-K. He was an assistant at the recreation department. He was an older man at the time, and he just loved helping young men and young women grow up. And he would sit at the gate. You had to come in the gate. Some paid admission, some didn't, but he was always at the gate. One of the kids was always there taking up admission, and Dink greeted everybody as they came in and said goodbye to everybody as they left out. And he, especially in the summertime during the day, he would tell stories and He'd also worked at the state hospital. He was quite a character, very influential. Freddie Layton was the recreation director at the time, and then he would be my high school football coach. He was a big influence on a lot of youth in this town. And Jerry Foster was the owner of Nash's Men's Store. It's no longer there either, but Jerry Foster gave me a job when I was in college and let me work my schedule around my classes. And he had always helped college kids kind of work their way through college. And I was lucky enough to spend about 5 years at Nash's Men's Store. And Jerry Foster was just, he was an amazing man. So there's others beyond that as well, folks that have been, special to me through the years, but those guys stand out. And my grandmother. My grandmother was a tremendous force in my life.
Well, so you told me that you moved to Louisville.
Uh-huh.
Hold on, the wind's blowing real bad, Mr. Cross. We're outside.
Okay.
I don't want it to mess with my recording. But, so did you ever come back to Milledgeville to live here after you moved off?
No.
So you never come back?
Never, not to live. My mother and stepfather, well, when I went to seminary, my dad and his wife were living here, and my mother and stepfather were living here. My stepfather's still here. My mother just passed away on Tuesday.
Hey, I'm sorry to hear that.
Of this week.
I remember last time I talked to you, you told me she wasn't doing too well.
Yeah. So we're having her funeral on Saturday. But so I come back, from time to time to visit. I've come back. My mother and stepfather used to have an antique store, and I'd come back to help them in the store, but never have moved back here to live.
So I was going to ask you this question as well, Mr. Bowe. So you told me about your experiences playing baseball and growing up as a kid. Who would you say that your closest friend growing up was? Like, who was your closest friend growing up?
My middle brother is 2 years younger than I am. He and I were very close growing up. And David is that choir guy that I told you he was going to quit playing football.
Yeah.
My cousin Tommy was very close. He also played football and baseball. We did a lot of crazy things. We lived out at the lake some. Lake Sinclair has also been a very important part of my growing up. Tommy Williamson was another childhood friend who's still a good friend now. So those guys pretty much.
Now, will you tell me about, like, you leaving Milledgeville, like you traveling? Have you traveled anywhere significant?
I have. My last 20 years of my career, I traveled significantly. And I was on the senior staff of a church consulting group. So I was all over the world, teaching, training, preaching, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. Did you enjoy traveling?
I enjoyed being in different places. I didn't enjoy getting to different places.
That's how I am, Mr. Bowe. I can't get away from home for too long.
I love being in different places, but it's such a hassle to get there. I don't enjoy traveling, but I enjoy seeing new places. So, I spent some time in Cuba, and I love that. I spent several times in Chile and Israel, Great Britain. So, kind of full full career traveling, helping people.
Well, that sounds interesting, Mr. Bat.
It was a lot of fun.
What would you say the craziest country you've ever been to is?
Cuba.
Cuba? And why is that?
Well, you get off the airport in Havana and they take you downtown and it looks like 1950.
Yeah.
And nothing but old cars.
I bet that's pretty interesting. It brings you back in time.
It does. It's like going back in time. And
I heard that all them cars they have over there, they won't import new cars, so they just work on all the old ones.
That's right.
And that just goes to show that all them cars back in the day were built to last.
They were.
Because, like, the motor blows out on your car back then, the instruction manual will tell you how to rebuild your motor.
Pretty much. But
now they got to get caught up and got to do all types of stuff.
Got to have a computer. You can't replace your own motor now.
Oh, no, you can't.
Havana, well, Cuba, just the whole country of Cuba was a very interesting place. And then I spent 2 weeks in Kiev, Ukraine, and that was a pretty neat experience too.
Now, are there nice places in Cuba? Like,
oh yeah. We stayed in a hotel in Santiago de Cuba, which is Havana's on one side of the island and Santiago's on the other side. We stayed in Santiago, and we stayed in a hotel that for them was very nice. For us would be like a Best Western kind of place, but it was clean. We had great service. Had a bar out back, so it was hard to beat.
Yeah. Now, did you get one of them big old cigars down there in Cuba?
No.
You didn't get one? What do they call them? Monte Cristos, I think.
I guess so. I'm not a smoker, so I never have been tempted. My allergies are so bad. Anytime I get around smokers or a grill or right now pollen, just messes me up so bad. I never did go into smoking, but they had some really great drinks, and because they had fresh sugar cane and fresh pineapple, all that was always part of your drink, and rum was always part of your drink. So that was fun.
You hear that police officer pass us?
I do.
I really hope something bad happened for him to be going that fast down the road,
Well, I think the hot light is on at Krispy Kreme.
So, Mr. Bud, how have you seen this town change over the years?
Oh, Lord. The first big change was when they closed the state hospital. That was a major, major blow to the economy.
And do you think that if they would have never gotten rid of the hospital, that Milledgeville would be a lot more well off right now?
I do. There would have been so many ways to utilize that hospital to teach people, but they never did utilize it as fully as they could have.
And I wonder why they didn't do that.
Well, people just didn't think about it in those days. You went to school, you didn't go to get a practical. If you were going to get a practical trade, you went to trade school and then you went to work. You didn't really do apprentice work, but they had medical staff, they had psychological staff, they had chaplains, they had recreation, they had 4 or 5 different, they had juvenile departments there. They had one of the largest juvenile wards for crazy kids in the nation at one time. So it was, but just didn't think about it in the day. But
do you think that we should preserve the history over there? Or, I know Brian Kemp's trying to tear all that stuff down.
I think there should be think there should be parts of the history that should be preserved. The Powell building, which is a big white building out there on campus.
Yes.
That's kind of the centerpiece. That should definitely be preserved. Maybe a museum put in there. And, I don't know what else. Georgia College bought the auditorium, which they play basketball out there, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe have concerts out there. That was one of my home bases because my dad was recreation therapy director, so we lived out there for a while. No, I mean, we didn't live there, but we played in that gym a lot. So I think some elements of it should be preserved for sure. And then Georgia College and Georgia Military College, they just are buying everything and putting in other stuff. So if it weren't for those two colleges, man, Milledgeville would be really bad shape. So.
Oh yeah, and if it wasn't for the college kids, this town right here would be in shambles.
It'd be tough, yeah. So.
And that's sad. It's so sad because this place has so much history.
Yep.
And it has a lot of untold stories.
It does.
That are in plain sight.
Yep. So, it ain't what it ought to be, but it's more than it could be. So.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I guess we have to celebrate that.
Right.
Yep.
What role has Milledgeville played in shaping your identity or influencing your life's journey?
Well, Milledgeville introduced me to a lot of great people. Not just people from Milledgeville, but people who would come into the college for a couple of years and then go on to something else, and had formed some really great friendships with folks through the years who would come to class. We'd be friends. We'd be in fraternity together. We'd be in church together, and then they would graduate and go on to something else. So that's
you said you said you were in fraternity here. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was a part of Phi Delta Theta fraternity. It was
in Milledgeville,
in Georgia College.
They don't have a chapter anymore, I don't believe.
No, they lost their chapter because they got crazy there for a while. But they've just been reinstated, so they're coming back in the fall, I think.
They actually did tell us that they're coming back the chapter's coming back in the fall. They asked us if any of us wanted to be like in the fraternity, but we all are in. Well, I'm in Kappa Sig here.
All right. Well, if you can't get in a good one, Kappa Sig's a good one to get in.
Yeah, it didn't. I don't think Kappa Sig came around here until the late.
No, they were there. There were three chapters that all came in together: Pikes, Kappa Sigs, and Phi Delta. We were the only three they allowed on campus when we first got here. When I was coming, I went in fall of '73, and so Kappa Sig, Pikes, and Phi Delta just all come to campus.
Now, was that a good time? Tell me a little bit about your fraternity experience.
I loved it. It gave me an identity on campus. I was a town boy on campus. So if you're a town boy, you just come to class and then you go home. Or I would come to class and go to work and come back and do more and go back home. But if you live in the dorm and you see each other in the cafeteria and you're in the library, just walking back and forth to class, you see people and meet people and know people in a different way.
You definitely made a lot of connections.
If you live in town. If you live in town, you just come and go and don't really build much fellowship. But the campus, the fraternity gave me a lot of access to the campus. So, I really enjoyed that and appreciated that. Made some great friends through that.
Do you still talk to any of your friends that you were?
I do. Several of them occasionally. A couple of them have died now, and so it's just a lot of different things going on.
Yeah. Well, how long were you in fraternity for?
For 2 years while I was on campus. I mean, you're always in the fraternity after you get in it.
Yeah,
but,
you're always a brother.
Yeah. But we had a good time. We had a really good time.
Now, were there any sororities on campus at the time?
There were. There was Phi Mu, Delta Zeta, and AD Pi.
So you just had 3 of them. There's a couple more now.
Yeah. So we all kind of adopted one. You know, Phi Delta had Phi Mu, and Kappa Sig had Delta Zeta, and the Pikes had AD Pi. That you know, it wasn't official by any means, but if we were having a mixer of some sort, we had Phi Mu's with us, and Kappa Sigs had DZs with them, and you know, it was a good way to do it.
Yeah. Well, did y'all have like a central house? Where was it located in Milledgeville?
No, we didn't. Nobody had a house.
Nobody had a house?
No, nobody had a house. So we would meet at different places. You know, somebody in town would have a lake house, or we just everybody meet at Bo's house, or you know, whatever. Just went to different places and hung out. It would have been great if we'd had a house. That would have been great, but didn't have that.
Well, I guess a fraternity house is just a bunch of people who live in the house in the fraternity.
Right.
I guess a lot of people, I guess back then, like leases downtown weren't, I don't, did people really live downtown back then? Or was it all just like,
not so much. It was a thriving downtown.
Really?
And it was not catered to college students that much when I was in college.
So would you say that downtown was more populated now? Or
not necessarily more populated, but downtown right now is certainly geared for the campus.
Oh yeah.
It was not that way growing up.
Now, Mr. Bo, I hadn't asked you how old you are. Yesterday we couldn't ask the lady how old she is, but I can ask you how old you are.
I'm 70 years old.
You're 70 years old. So that means you would have graduated high school in
71.
71.
Graduated Georgia College in 73.
So
Lord of mercy.
So when you come back here to Milledgeville, I know you said your mother just passed away, so you probably won't be back after her funeral, but are there any local traditions or events that you look forward to each year?
No.
Like when you come here?
No. When I come here, I go to my mama's house and pretty much sit there until it's time to leave, and then I get in the car and go home. So
yeah,
there's no real draw other than my mom.
Yeah, it's just where you're from.
My stepfather will still be here, so we'll come back and forth to see him. But no, you know, life has moved on from Milledgeville. So
now you told me you lived in Winston-Salem now, North Carolina.
I live in Youngsville, North Carolina.
Youngsville, North Carolina. Okay.
Which is just north of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Do you like it up there?
I do. Yeah. It's nice.
I love North Carolina. It's beautiful up there.
Small town out in the country. Small subdivision. Yeah, it's a good place.
Are you up in the mountains?
No, we're in kind of the Piedmont. I don't know what they call that. I don't know what that means, but it's kind of flat. It's not the sand hills of North Carolina, but Still mostly flat.
Yeah. So, as we grow up, we all have significant challenges. Could you tell me about a significant challenge that you faced while you were here in Milledgeville and how you overcame it?
Well, my folks divorced or they broke up when I was 18. It took a while before they finalized, but when I was 18, my father and mother broke up. So my mother had to move across town because my dad got state housing, but my mother didn't. So we had to move across town, and there were three brothers and my mother, and we were, my mother was just lost.
Yeah.
And so we all had to just kind of band together, and great friends, great church, all that just helped us get through it. And, a lot of prayer, a lot of guitar playing.
You can play the guitar?
I do, yeah, I do. So there's probably some beer drinking in the middle of that. So all of that together, helped us hold on to each other and kind of get our bearings again. And my mom at that point married my stepfather, who had been my algebra teacher at high school, and started again. So,
well, I appreciate
that's
you.
One of those, and there's a
that
lot of ripple effects to that. How am I going to pay for college now that my parents are divorced? They didn't have money to give me to pay. How am I going to have enough money to have a place to live on my own? I don't want to live in my mother's house. So I worked hard. I worked a lot. I went to school, paid my college bills, and lived in my grandmother's house, and bought a car and all that stuff that you do as a young adult. But it was a challenge. So I had to work hard to get it done. I got about 5 more minutes, but I'll have to get on to something else.
Oh, you're all good. Well, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. I was about to wrap it up, but so do you know anything pertaining to Flannery O'Connor?
Just a little bit. I didn't know anything about Flannery O'Connor until I went to seminary, because Milledgeville didn't talk about her in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
But my cousin, Sandra Worsham, was very instrumental in bringing Flannery O'Connor to some sort of fame, I guess you could say. That's not really the right word, but awareness. My cousin helped raise that awareness. And I was in seminary when I was first introduced to Flannery O'Connor and found out she was from Milledgeville. So she wasn't talked about. There was no celebrity attached to her at all. I think they probably thought she was a little weird in those days, in the early 50s and 60s. But so I didn't get into Flannery until I left here.
Yeah. Well, lastly, the last question I'm gonna ask you, Mr. Bowe, is do you know anybody else who could share stories like you just told me about growing up in Milledgeville?
There's a guy who writes for the Union Recorder. His name is Rick Millines.
I'm sorry, what's his name?
Rick Millines, Millins. And he's written a couple of articles in the Union Recorder. I think he's a feature writer for them right now, and he's writing about some of the history. So you should interview Rick if you could get to him. And I'm guessing if you call the Union Recorder and tell him what you're doing, Rick would be a great person to talk to.
All right. Well, I'll tell Mr. Rick's name to my teacher, and we'll try to try to get some information on him, see if he would like to do an interview.
Yeah.
But hey, Mr. Bo, I appreciate you talking to me.
Listen, man, I appreciate it. This was fun.
Oh, yeah. I enjoyed talking to you, Mr. Bo. I really did.
We hope you enjoyed learning more about the people and historical events connected to Milledgeville and Flannery O'Connor in this episode. If you or someone you know has stories to share related to either of these topics, we'd love to hear them. In addition to documenting community memories, you'll also help us preserve your story for future generations. Visit our website, collectingthepastmilledgeville.wordpress.com, to learn more.